I perfect. Um, okay, well, perfect. I don't have a itinerary at the moment, but with that said, I'm super excited to have. Sorry, I'm sorry. I thought I heard something. Um, it won't even load on my computer, which is even better. It actually won't. That's really funny. But we do have ourselves Lieutenant Colonel Isaac Lee from the USMC. Um, he is in a sport on his role on Combat Aviator. That's all I have about you, sir, at the moment. I don't know if Raymond has something more to say.
Well, you want me to do the introduction there? Is that what you're
I
hunting
don't
around?
have one. I literally know that that's all I know about this gentleman. That's all I know.
Hey,
I just,
everybody, welcome to the July 24th meeting of the Satellite Rotary Club Military Family Sport. Our guest is Lieutenant Colonel Issac G. Lee, United States Marine Corps retired. He's going to share a riveting account of his journey as a combat aviator from officer's candidate school to squadron commander. His memoir, Hangar 4, offers a candid glimpse into the challenges and triumphs experienced during his 2 decades of service, including 7 deployments and 4 combat tours in the Middle East. Through his candid storytelling, Lee delves into the physical, mental, and emotional demands of life in the squadron, in the cockpit, in war zones, and at home. Drawing from his own experiences, Lee sheds light on his personal experiences and the profound impact of military service on both individuals and families. His presentation serves as a testament to the resilience, dedication, and sacrifice of those who served our country, offering valuable insights into leadership, duty, and the intricate realities of modern warfare. Lieutenant Colonel Lee, welcome to the Satellite Rotary Club of Military Family Support.
Hey, thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. And thank you guys for all
really
the
happy
stuff
to have you.
you're
It's
doing
impressive,
for
though.
military families.
Of course, it's really impressive though, because on your square,
Looks like we just lost him.
It looks like we did lose Dominic. Go ahead and launch into your presentation, sir.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, thank you all again for having me here, and definitely be happy to talk a little bit about my story and why I decided to share that in a memoir titled Hangar 4. So, like most people, took off and joined the military, for a host of reasons, without really thinking about the fact that a war might break out a few years later, which is ultimately what happened in my case. I went to officer candidate school for the Marine Corps in the summer of 1997. Like most young Marine soldiers, sailors, airmen, you're not quite sure what you got into when you first take off to go, but you quickly find out once you get there. And in my case, I would say, something that jumped out at me right away was just the togetherness, the camaraderie, all the things you always hear people talk about the military. And I found that to be very prevalent immediately, that I was just all of a sudden part of this community of really great people that were all kind of united. And you have a mission that obviously everyone is focused on, but there's so much more to it than that. And the people and relationships that you start to develop along the way become the thing that matters most to you. So in my case, like you said in the intro, I went through the entire, 2 decade career, several deployments, a few to combat, and, went from a nervous young lieutenant all the way through to being the commanding officer of a squadron down here at Miramar, the CH-53 Echo helicopter squadron. And throughout that journey, at the same time, I'm married, I had a couple of children. You're trying to be that person you need to be at home. So that family element is prevalent as well as you're balancing all these things while you're living this somewhat crazy adventure at times. But throughout the entirety of my career, I actually kept a journal, which is something I started doing right at the beginning of my time at officer candidate school, and was kind of an unusual decision to make, I guess, at the time. It certainly wasn't common, but it's something that I did, and I maintained that throughout the entire course of my career. So by the time my career wrapped up, I transitioned out to the business world and was really focused on, the next phase of life, if you will. And I didn't really think about it a whole lot for those first few years, although I was doing a lot of work personally, for my own transition and trying to help my family transition into life after the military. And I will definitely come back and talk more about that at the end. But what happened was in 2021, for me personally, I just started hearing a lot about other people I'd served with in the military that were having a very difficult time in different ways. But the themes were pretty common. A lot of marriage issues, substance abuse, having a hard time finding employment, maintaining employment, all the things that in some ways shouldn't be really surprising to anybody from a generation of service members who spent a lot of time on deployment and frankly deploying to combat and getting that, call it the extreme aspect of the experience. And the more I heard those stories, the more I felt compelled to do something to attempt to help. And in the early stages of that, for me, that was just reaching out to fellow service members that I knew, that I heard were having a hard time, and really just trying to be a good friend. But I ultimately came to the conclusion that the thing I might be able to do that would help more people would be to share my story in like a brutally honest way. And in doing that, maybe that might be helpful to them, if in no other way, just because it would give them a frame of reference to say, hey, there's at least one other person out there who's experienced this, who has these thoughts, who has these feelings, and who's working to reconcile those as well. So that was really my motivation to sit down and write the book and share the story. And I'll tell you that I purposefully included a couple of aspects of my life and my perspective on these things that are fairly uncommon in a story like this or in a book like this. All of the Marine Corps things that happen, the deployments, the flights, the adventures, is of course in there, but that's really just kind of the foundation that the story is built on. And there's really two story arcs in here that I hope will be pertinent to your organization and the people that you support that follow this program. But the first was really the personal transformation that I went through just as a person, because that experience, it has an effect, and it changes you in some ways for the better, and in some ways arguably for the worse. But I was very honest about that personal transformation and how that really evolved for me over time, over the course of my career, and as I had different experiences along the way. But the second aspect I was really honest about, that would probably be most interesting to you all and those that you support, is the family piece of that. Like, what was it like balancing a home life and trying to maintain something resembling a normal home life while you're coming and going from combat zones, and really the way I always described it was like living on two different planets simultaneously. So on one planet, I'm this Marine Corps officer, pilot, going to combat and doing all these crazy things and making it back home again. And on the other planet, I'm supposed to be a well-adjusted father and husband living in the suburbs and doing very seemingly normal things. But that transition back and forth between those worlds is challenging for certain. And it puts a lot of strain on all of your personal relationships, puts a strain on your family, it puts a strain on your kids. Even under the best of circumstances, when everyone is seemingly handling those things well, it's just difficult. So I really want to talk, today or this evening with you all about kind of that home piece. But I'll give you a little more background on sort of the experience and the timeline, how it unfolded for me, to add a little context first. So in my case, you would say my timing was either perfect or terrible, depending on your perspective. I went to officer candidate school in the summer of '97, went to the basic school, which is required for all Marine Corps officers, then flight school. By the time all that was done and I actually got to my first fleet unit, it was December of 2000. And I was out here at Marine Corps Station Miramar in San Diego. So little did I know, or anyone else knew, that, 9 months later, the world was going to change. And it certainly did. So I went on my first deployment that summer, the summer of 2000, just a standard unit deployment at the time, where we went over to Okinawa, Japan, and kind of bounced around the Pacific a little bit. And it just all seemed like this big, fun adventure. right up until 9/11 happened. And I'll never forget that evening, or what was evening for me and my squadron mates in Japan, which is about 13 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time. So there was actually a typhoon that was happening in Okinawa at the time. So we were on typhoon lockdown, which means we're all supposed to be in our barracks and behaving. Debatable on whether we were complying with the second part of that, but we were having a good time and hanging out and having a couple of beers and just doing what Marines do in their downtime, so to speak. When the first plane hit the towers, and I'll never forget, one of my squadron mates ran into the room, turned the TV on, and it didn't take us but a few seconds to realize what we were looking at and to understand that everything had just changed for us in a moment. We didn't know where we were going. We didn't know what we were doing, but we were pretty certain in that moment that we were going to war, and that it was going to be our turn for our generation to do what, many generations before us had done. And that's exactly what unfolded from that point forward. We finished that deployment, came back to San Diego. By that time, we already had Marines and other, special forces and some other units were in Afghanistan, starting to fight. And it really just revved up from there. So in my case, I ended up deploying for the second time about a year later for Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I was there and flew in the initial invasion. And there really started a series of adventures and crazy things happening for me personally over the course of the next 3 years. So my wife and I had actually had our oldest child when I came home from that first deployment. She was premature. She was in the hospital for about 9 weeks. And that was our introduction to parenthood. And we got her home that fall of 2002. And then a couple of months after that, I was on a ship headed for Iraq. So walking away that first time, going to combat, and then having a wife and this tiny baby daughter, and thinking all the things that you think of when you're doing something like that, and acknowledging to yourself, like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to see them again. What's going to happen to them if I don't make it back? The initial acceptance of those realities was challenging. And then I went on the deployment. We invaded Iraq. I did a lot of flying over there. Had a couple close calls, more than I care to remember. But it was quite the experience. And then I came home. I was only home for a few months, and supposedly OIF was winding down, and then it wasn't. And the next thing I knew, I was on an airplane going back to Okinawa, and where we picked up some aircraft and went right back to Iraq for the second time. That deployment was a little less, how should I say, exciting, just because at that phase of the war, we were really setting up as a country to maintain a presence. So we were kind of moving Marine soldiers, everybody across the battle space to establish what would be our foothold for the next several years. We didn't know it was going to be the next several years at the time, but that's what we were doing. Came home from that deployment, and at that point, I was a pretty senior aviator in terms of qualifications. I'd already done 3 deployments, and I took an extension to stay in the squadron and do 1 more deployment. So I went back to Iraq for a 3rd time in 3 years in 2005. And that deployment was very kinetic, because at that point, as a country, we transitioned fully into fighting an insurgency, which was very different than what we've been doing in OIF the first time. But the sum total of that experience, for my family and I, was that for a period there of about 4 years, we had this premature baby girl, which is a very, in of itself, human experience that can be challenging, for young parents. And then for the most part, I disappeared to go fight a war for the next 3 years. And I will tell you that getting back on the same page with my family, and specifically my wife on the backside of that, was not an easy thing to do for either one of us, for multiple reasons. And neither of us, due to our own personal experiences, really had the bandwidth to be who we needed to be for each other, because we were all just you kind of default into what I think of in retrospect as survival mode, right? Everyone's doing their best, but you're really just trying to get through it. And we did get through it, fortunately. And, because of the nature of war, it is impossible to ever feel sorry for yourself or think of it in any capacity just because of, the brothers and sisters that we lose in the course of those endeavors. But it was something that it still weighed on us in total. I'd lost a few close friends. I'd seen some things. She saw, friends of hers lose their husbands, and when you're living in the middle of something like that, it definitely has an impact on you as a person. So at that point, I took orders to what we call a B billet, a non-deploying unit. Went out to our aviation weapons and tactics school, was an instructor there for 3 years, and that really gave us a chance as a family to kind of reset. And I think to the surprise of both my wife and I, we decided to continue on in the Marine Corps, knowing full well we were still, at war, and that decision to continue, because I was right around year 10 when that came up, meant that we would probably stay for a full 20. So I finished that up, went through a quick master's degree program, and then went right back to Miramar and right back into a squadron. But at that point, I was a little more senior. I was a major, and immediately trained up and took a detachment, half the squadron, to Afghanistan for another combat deployment, which I will tell you, and the part of me that will sound strange is that over the course of those deployments and that experience, as challenging as it was, I also will freely admit that I loved it. I loved the mission. I loved the risk. I loved the danger. If I was ever addicted to a drug, I would say combat flying was it. As bizarre as that might sound, and I do refer to it sometimes as an addiction, because it is one of those things that you understand is inherently dangerous and in many ways probably not good for you, but you just love it, and you fall in love with how that feels, and the adrenaline and the excitement and all the things that go with it, which creates some complexity in for your inner monologue for certain. And at that stage in my career, I was advanced enough and mature enough to realize that's how I felt about it. And also in the logical side of my thought process, understood that was probably a little odd and maybe problematic for me later. But I was aware of it. So that deployment, for all practical purposes, went great. It was a very rewarding experience. And flying and fighting in Afghanistan was something I will never forget, for certain. But when I finished that up, I came back to Miramar again, and I wasn't supposed to do any more deployments. We'd had another child, was on the B billet, our son. So at that point, I had a young son at home too. So 2 kids, and I was looking forward to having a semi-normal life for a couple of years, and that lasted for a few months. And then I got asked to take another deployment out on a Marine Expeditionary Unit, and that one came up on short notice. But gone is gone. So I was back on the ship. I was back away from home, and that was deployment number 6. And when I came home from that one, I actually got orders to the Pentagon, which was an interesting experience. But moved the family across country. Again, we were kind of looking forward to settling down for a bit, but about 3 months after I got to the Pentagon, I got orders right back to Miramar, because I've been selected to be the commanding officer of a squadron, which was a tremendous honor and was awesome, that I got selected right out of the gate on my first available opportunity. So we moved right back to San Diego the next summer and checked back into the unit and took over as the commanding officer of the squadron. And that was really my last meaningful billet, so to speak, in the Marine Corps. And at that point, through all the experience that I'd had and all the things I'd come to understand about myself, I was really thinking about 2 things when I went into that command tour. One was I wanted to do everything I could to make that experience as good as it could possibly be for the Marines in the unit, knowing that was going to be the last time I was in a truly meaningful leadership role, in the Marine Corps, before I exited. But the second thing was I had really started thinking about, and I'd honestly started thinking about it leading up to that time, not just at that time, but really thinking about who I was, who I'd become, and what I needed to do to prepare myself to transition out of the military when that was complete. But at the time, that was really just an idea. It was still kind of a concept, and I wasn't sure what that looked like. So I knocked out the command tour. That went well, extremely rewarding. I'll forever be thankful to the Marines that were in that unit in HMH 462. Just a tremendous experience. And when I was done, I had 1 year remaining in the Marine Corps and officially submitted all the paperwork to finish up and transition out the following summer of 2017. So for that last year, I went up to 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing and worked for our commanding general at the time as his deputy operations officer, essentially overseeing all operations for Marine aviation on the West Coast. It was a big job, but it was an enjoyable job. But I also had some time for the first time to really kind of focus on myself a little bit. And I was very aware that at that point, I had a lot of work to do to get myself ready to stop being Lieutenant Colonel Lee, the Marine Corps Aviator, and become Isaac, who's ready to go out into the regular world and interface with normal people and have a normal job and do more seemingly normal things. And so I did a couple of things simultaneously that were smart, that helped me a lot. First and foremost, I really dove into the transition process in terms of looking for jobs. And thankfully in San Diego, there are a ton of organizations and resources here to help transitioning military people. I plugged into a couple of those and started really networking as I was learning what the word networking meant, because that was certainly a foreign language to me as well. But going to events, meeting people, getting good at explaining who you are, what it is you think you're interested in doing once you're out of the military. But the second thing I did, and was really the most important thing I did, and I will openly say probably the smartest thing I've ever done for myself in the entirety of my life, was I went to counseling at a veterans center here in the San Diego area. And to be honest with you, at the time, I felt what I'd come to know is fine. Like for me, I felt fine. I felt normal. I wasn't in crisis. I wasn't upset. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I wasn't having outbursts or anything like that. But what I'd come to be aware of is that I'd just become very robotic in my emotions as a human. So I could still interact with people, have a personality. I had a sense of humor. I could express and feel love, but anything that resembled a negative emotion, I'd completely shut down. So no fear, no pain, no anxiety, no grief, no all of those things that you would consider negative emotions, I'd completely compartmentalized and turned those off. And that was what I was aware of when I went to counseling and was trying to figure out, how do I get myself back to a place where I have normal human feelings and emotions and reactions to things, and because I just felt like I owed that specifically to my family, but to, friends, colleagues, everyone else that I interface with. And so doing that was extremely helpful. And I will tell you that that's a process that I started then. I'm thankful I started when I did. And it continues to this day, and it will never stop. I don't think that I will never consider myself to be good, to be free and clear, to be like, oh, everything's great now. And I have a very nice life and I'm happy, I would say. But it's something that I'll always continue to work on, because I do think it's important. And I know how tricky that can be when you've had experiences that are that extreme. And so if you don't maintain that self-care, that's when things can kind of catch up to you and grab you. So it was important to me to ensure that I do that. And so I still do that to this day. I still go to counseling. I participate in group events at the Veterans Center here as well, that are also extremely helpful, because that's mostly Vietnam era veterans actually that I interface with in those group settings. And it's extremely helpful to me because they've already lived this, right? They're a couple, 3 decades ahead of me in some cases. And so that wisdom and the things that they learned along the way is helpful. But I will tell you the one thing that I missed in transition, and it was a big miss, that caught up later and became something that we had to deal with as a family at home. And that's that I was focused on my transition out of the military, but I should have also been focused on and helping my wife transition out of the military. And that's something that I don't think either of us put enough thought into at the time, and then realized it a few years later. right? Because your life changes a lot for both of you or for the entire family when you transition out of the military. There are things there, I think, in the military that you to some degree take for granted because of you're part of a community. You almost have this built-in social network and group of friends and events to go to, and all those things really come back to being part of a community that you as a family feel part of, and you have a common bond with, and people that you relate to. And a few years after I was out of the Marine Corps, I think it dawned on both my wife and I that had gone away, and that it was problematic, and that we had not appropriately replaced it with something else. I had replaced a lot of it for myself and what I was doing professionally with my new career and networking, and got involved with some nonprofits and did all those things. But we could have and should have done a much better job of doing that together. And I think, for organizations like yours and groups that you work with, just being aware of that in of itself could be extremely helpful to military families, not only those that are still serving, but especially those who are no longer serving and or in the process of transition. Anything you can help or do to help them find new community to be part of, find different communities to be part of, like anything that helps them just embrace that tribal thing that we all need as human beings, and have other good people to interface with and do good things with, volunteer with, socialize with, I think is extremely helpful to military families at that stage, especially when we're kind of learning to live with life on the other side, so to speak. And that was really the main thing I wanted to get to this evening. So I know we had some time for Q&A built in, so I can stop there, and happy to answer any specific questions that anyone has about anything at all.
Oh, well, perfect. Thank you, sir. Listen, we appreciate your story. Appreciate what you've gone through. I was a jarhead back in the early 2000s and the invasion and everything. So I understand. Yeah, spending all the time. I had a girlfriend who's now my wife of X amount of years, and we really do understand. I do. I not to the extent also what you're discussing, but I was boots on the ground. I was an RO back then. So we may have crossed paths back in Fallujah and whatnot, or Ramadi, or Christ at some point somewhere in Iraq, because I spent 2 years living there. So I really do understand, sir. Yeah, there's so much. I deal with now with my brother-in-law, who's we served the same time in the Marine Corps. Now he's an Army major, and so when you actually were in DC, I was in DC with you. What I was assuming you lived on a fort in DC.
No, actually, I was out in town. I was stationed at the Pentagon, but
Got it.
it was right off Route 66 near the Vienna metro station, right there in
Yeah.
Vienna.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about because yeah, my brother also was at the Pentagon, but he lived on the fort instead. He chose that lifestyle. So yes, no, I do understand. But yes, to your point, that transition is so big, and he's still in currently. Now they're in Germany, and I try to tell him, listen, what I can do to help you at all times. There's always something I want to do and what can I help? Because to your point, you're living this lifestyle that's so big for what you guys are doing all the time, and to make that transition out, it's a massive difference. And he's got 3 children of his own, as he's had in his time in the Army. And you look at man, oh man, that's a big transition, especially now they're in Europe. And he's going to stay in, be a lieutenant colonel, I'm sure, by the time he gets out back here in the States. So I don't know personally. I'm just living it through the family life experience of like, man, I was there for these 4 years and I was a little crazy then, but he's still going 20 plus years later. I imagine it's quite wild, but we do appreciate the story because it gives all of us here an idea of like how it worked out. We don't know that story. We don't. I mean, you're talking about what, 7 deployments you said, right?
Yeah, 7 total.
So listen. I only did 2 for 2 years total, and I can understand that drive to be overseas. And I was there in the beginning, back in 04 and 05, and you get so used to it. It's easy in a weird way. You live that lifestyle all the time, and you leave your family behind, and which is you don't want to, but you become in this habit of being there that you start to look around and this is just your whole life. And in a weird way, you start to really enjoy it. And it's weird. And talking with counselors also, you start to realize like, oh, I don't think this is supposed to be normal, but this is what it you become used to that lifestyle. You
Yeah.
just go, oh, that's what it is. This is who I am. This is my personality. This and you deal with the other families going like, I don't think this is right. So, but you don't notice that at the time. So I as a man who's only deployed twice, I definitely understand as a Marine that you just get used to it, and they're like, that's what we do. Um, they rattle that cage for so long that you get used to thinking I'm supposed to be over here. I'm supposed to be doing these things.
You do
So
for sure. And I would say, and this is, I mean, just being brutally honest, the hardest part for me was always coming home, as ridiculous and backwards as that sounds. And of course, you're excited to see your family and all those things, and that feels really good for say 72 hours.
right,
But what happened every time was somewhere around day 4, day 5. I started really missing it. And the way I describe it to people is it's like you're playing a football game and in the middle of the third quarter the game is tied. And someone tells you, hey, not only can you not play anymore, but you have to leave the stadium and you can't watch it on the radio or watch it on TV or listen on the radio. Like, so you're just transplanted out of this place where this game is happening and you're in the middle of it and you don't know what's happening. You can't see it, you can't hear it. And that in of itself is a maddening feeling because your inherent desire inside is like, there's still Marines over there. I should be with them. Like I should be with them, helping them. I need to go fight with them. But
absolutely.
you can't. Instead, you're standing in line at the grocery store with everyone else feeling very out of place and kind of questioning the universe, like, what am I doing here?
I understand everything you're saying, sir. I was at Disneyland. I was at Disneyland. And I looked around and went, I'm at Disneyland. There are guys I still know over there. I'm at Disneyland right now, being Southern California, and I was like, that doesn't seem quite right. Like, why am I in Disneyland right now? I I can sympathize with exactly what you're saying, sir. So, yeah, it's a different thing, but as I said, we're supposed to keep going forward. So I know with that, I know I should talk to Raymond. Raymond, I know you have a question also. Jump right on in.
So, I guess Isaac's what you prefer now, Colonel, but
Sure.
that's hard for some of us. Uh,
Oh,
there's two
good.
things. Number one is just about an hour ago, a couple of us were talking about our speakers that we have, especially the ones that have written a book, and many of them, the book process has become a cathartic experience for them, and really gave them a roadmap to recovery in many instances. And we've heard these stories at the Satellite Club, and they touch home with all of us a lot. So here's my question for you. I did 25 years as a policeman, and so when I was in the Coast Guard, by the way, so that's the junior service that they, we don't get a lot of credit, but we're out there. I fought the Battle of Marina Del Rey. That's what I tell people. So, but I did 25 years, and when I retired, a New York homicide guy retired about the same time as a friend of mine, and about 6 months in, he says, when we were in, we were the best. Now we're gone, we're a pest. And is organizationally, did you get that feeling also from the organization?
Not at all, actually. I mean, I stayed local in San Diego, so I'm still close to the community. It's there. I get invited to things every now and then on base or a squadron event, and I actually really enjoyed that. Like it's enough of a connection that you get to go back and do like the fun parts, the good parts, without doing all the hard stuff. So it's been nice to stay connected to it. And I would say one of the most rewarding things for me about the book experience thus far is just the number of Marines and former Marines, in many cases, Marines I never personally knew while I was serving, that have reached out and said, hey, thanks for sharing this story for whatever reason, because it sounded, was familiar to them or familiar to their families. And even more rewarding than that is I've had several spouses reach out to me and say, hey, thanks for writing this. I understand my spouse better now. And that was really neat. And that's something I was not anticipating, to be totally honest with you. The first time, it really kind of caught me off guard. And after it happened a few times, I was like, oh, well, I felt good about that. It's helpful to families in general, hopefully.
That was my question. And then the other thing, and behind you, echo chamber.
Yes, sir. So yeah, I'm in my office at home. So I'm relegated to one room for all of my Marine Corps things. But in Okinawa, Japan, there's a Marine Corps Air Station, Futema, and I did a couple of deployments there. And in the barracks that we lived in is a common area room. There's nothing spectacular about it. It's just a concrete room and a nondescript barracks in Japan. But we had a little common area lounge, and it was called the Echo Chamber, which was a reference to the CH-53 Echo helicopter. So one of the many trinkets I have for my time in service is that sign over my shoulder is an exact replica of the sign that's on the wall in that room to this day, over in Japan.
Very cool.
And that's the night, right?
I'm sorry.
The CH-53 night.
Yeah, CH-53 Echo was a Super Stallion. The Navy
Oh,
variant is the Sea Knight.
okay. I just remember dealing with the night. That's all. No, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. I was there from '04 to '05, and then I spent all of '06 and '07 there.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're referring to a tactical call sign when you were in Iraq.
No, 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 no. That's what they referred what you were saying
Oh, okay.
correctly. Yes, I didn't know that. Just I was a enlisted Marine, so I always have to ask, like, oh, okay. I just spent a lot of time in a frog, jumping from one place to the next place to the next place. So I always ask, like, oh, okay. It's just a very different lifestyle from Private Torres today. So I always like to ask about how that worked out. Okay, no, yeah. So
No worries.
what a fantastic story, because that's a lot to go through, especially put your family through all those years, all those decades, and we really appreciate that. And one more time, what was the name of the book?
The title of the book is Hangar 4, which is a reference to one of the aircraft hangars at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, the hangar that's home to the CH-53 Echo helicopter squadrons to this day. So that is the central point that the story of my career kept coming back to as I wrote this book. All 7 deployments started and ended at Hangar 4. My retirement ceremony was there, which is kind of a significant landmark, if you will. So that's what I made the book title.
And absolutely perfect. I love everything about the hearing that. So thank you, sir. We appreciate that so much. You're more than welcome to stay on with us. It's a great story. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew the name of the book by the end of it. Thank you so much. You can stay on, like I said. With that, Raymond has all of our information to jump into the next thing. But thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Of course.
Hey, everybody. So the flyer's out. Our next food drive is September 28th. Interestingly enough, I got a call from the LA Air Force, Los Angeles Air Force Base. So we're going to actually be feeding 4 military posts families at Camp Pendleton, 29 Palms, Fort Irwin, and the the Air Force, Los Angeles Air Force Base. Apparently
Why not?
they've got personnel in am I on there? Yeah. They've got personnel in El Segundo and housing, and also in San Pedro in some of that old military housing. And so we got 2,000 copies of the flyers came in today, 50 posters, and Marilyn and I spoke to Josh at Waste Management, 50 boxes en route. And the best part of today was we got our nonprofit postal permit. So our mailer cost will go down from 73 cents an item to 50 or 23 cents. And this time we want to get, this is our smaller drive, but we need to get about 4 tons. Colonel, just so you know, so far we've raised for military food banks at Pendleton and at 29 Palms, 23 tons of food, this group of people. And so we do this every 6 months. So any questions about September 28th?
No, it's perfect. I know exactly. It's right across from the Lakers. Should we ask the Lakers to donate something, or no? Because it's like across the street from them. No, no,
You know,
I didn't think so.
I think we should reach out to whoever we got to reach out to.
Jay
The other
Moore.
thing,
We reached out to Jay Moore. He's married to the governor now
there you go.
of the Lakers.
The other one is the Marine Corps dinner is on November 10th, of course. That's our big fundraiser for Making Spirits Bright. That is that's providing Christmas gifts for enlisted personnel at 29 Palms and Camp Pendleton. This is their first year that they've broken away from the women's club, so we are their major fundraiser. We've committed to raising between $5,000 and $8,000 for them. Our dinner. We have our speaker, that is Lieutenant Colonel Sean Matroka, retired Marine Corps colonel, and we have the entertainment scheduled. Glenn, we have the meal ready to go. The tickets are being printed. The flyer, we're working on it a little differently because we want to turn that flyer into a trifold brochure so that we can mail it and save envelope costs. And then our 2,000 pieces that we mail out again will be pushing down, saving a couple of $1,000s in the administrative costs. We can give that to families. So the dinner's coming together.
What's the date of the dinner, Raymond?
That would be November 10th.
Sunday?
Yes, we're keeping it on the Marine Corps birthday. Sunday's going to work out well for us because most of the other balls that are going on are either the Friday or Saturday. And so we'll get probably a few more uniformed guys this time.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I don't even know what a Sunday looks like on November 10th in my time in. So,
well, last dinner, this will be our fourth annual. The third annual, we had 2 state senators, 3 mayors, 15 city council people, and a bunch of elected officials from other boards, and 27 veterans in the room of 105 people, more or less. So we're going to reconfigure the room a little differently. So hopefully we can get maybe 110 in the room, you think, Glenn? Maybe? Come on, shake your head, yes. We're going to do the best we can. But we're also still looking for another place. We need to grow this. Maybe the 5th.
We got to grow it this year, and next year, that's a better chance after everything we discussed.
The 5th year, I think, is the bigger one. Lastly, there is a new thing we started, and you guys can make your dues are very, very light, very compared to the Noon Rotary Club, at $15 a month. But we've just launched a thing within the club about honorary Rotarians. And so our first one we've made is the principal of San Dimas High School. And typically, we're not looking for somebody to avoid. I'm going to go talk to Captain Ash at the sheriff's station. I think the librarian at the library would be a great honorary Rotarian. So I think, maybe to make somebody at the recruiting station, one of those Marines over there, an honorary Rotarian, and have him on our list while he's here deployed. Something like that we can pull in maybe a dozen people into our mailing list. It doesn't cost them anything, doesn't cost us dues wise to international or district, but it builds our database of hands, which is what we really, really need to grow. So if that makes sense to you guys.
Yeah.
So Action
Absolutely.
360, that's all I have.
All right, well, perfect. That was the final 2 minutes I'm supposed to use up. I appreciate everyone coming out, especially you, sir. We're going to figure out the rest of this when it comes to our food drive. Like I said, if that's something that then the way, sir, that you have in your mind, this is something we consistently do. Like I said, we just took Camp Pendleton. We're looking at Fort Irwin, and then we're looking to make the jump over to, I think it's a fort, but I'm not sure. Mercury or Mars in Las Vegas.
No, we're gonna
Mardellis.
Yeah, Mardellis is guys, but we're gonna work at Nellis Air Force Base is the next growth, and that will be in March when we do the March one. We're gonna try to extend to March. So that will be 5 military bases, and we'll have 2 states. So it's a big jump, but it's possible.
With time, everything is possible. So with that said, absolutely fantastic. I'm glad to have everyone here, and I'm glad to have the support that we have. So thank you folks for coming out. I appreciate that. I'd never like to waste anyone's time, so it's so good to talk to you guys. And I'll talk with you soon. You guys have a great rest of the night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.